Good morning. What a great day it's going to be today. It's great that you guys are up and at it today on a Monday and going to make the most of your week. Something about quietness and listening that is really cool. I when my kids were little, we would go outside and I'd make them stand quietly on a snowy night and just listen to the snowflakes clicking, clicking, clicking to their little snowsuits. And that's a quiet listen because otherwise, if they were making their normal childlike noises, they'd never hear the clicking of the snowflakes hitting their little suits. And so that's a hard thing to do in this world is to listen because there's so much noise, so much action, so much screen time. But if you can be still and know that He's God and listen, maybe you can hear some things that you wouldn't otherwise hear. For example, years ago, I learned that Jesus taught the law. Jesus was a man born under the law, who lived under the law, taught the law, fulfilled the law, and then died at the hands of the Pharisees. But Jesus came that we might live under grace. And so the idea that Jesus' teachings weren't necessarily the principles for Christian living, they were the principles for coming to know Him as God, because the law came so you would sin more, and consequently, as you sin more, you understood that that dead nature in you was the problem that needed to be corrected, and Jesus gave you His nature at the moment you trusted in Him. And so when I listened and understood that the Gospels were not the way of life for the believers, but they were the way to the life for the believers, to know Jesus. And then when the law was no longer necessary, we're ruled by His Spirit within us now. But think about this little section of the law. I just thought this was really interesting because many of us sang a song when we were little about the wise man who built his house upon the rock. But right here in Matthew chapter 7, um, Jesus is teaching, and He um, gives some really hard lessons in chapter 7. There's the golden rule is in there, but there's some other things in there. And He says, in verse 24, He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house upon the rock." The wise man built his house upon the rock, and that house that you built on the rock, He said, was the one who hears the words of mine and acts on them. In other words, what I've told you a few weeks ago is the word obey means to listen to the voice. And when you listen to the voice of God and respond to Him, then you're the wise person that built your house upon the rock. And sometimes that word obey is really hard for people to wrap their brains around. But suppose you know that your God is a loving God and wants nothing more for you than the very best. And so if you perceive God to be a loving God who wants nothing but the very best, maybe when He whispers something quietly into your ear, you can respond with a lot of hope and a lot of courage and know that you're building your house, your life on the rock. And today, listen closely and build your life on that rock today because He's speaking sweet information your way. Take care.